Thank you, Carlos, and it's a great pleasure to be here. As always, I continue to learn at the feet of experts, and this has been a very thoughtful discussion to date, and certainly inspired many thoughts and ideas about what can be happening going forward. I have the good fortune of leading the technology practice for the largest investment banking advisory firm here in the U.S., focused on the lower middle market. And those would be businesses valued at under 500 million. So as you can imagine, there are a lot of them. You know, we're very actively involved today in the M&A activity around healthcare and technology, in particular, their convergence, which is where we see some very dynamic opportunities. And Sambit, who led off today's discussion, I think has created an organization that is a perfect example of how both patients can benefit, as well as or the organizations that support them can also be the beneficiaries. The healthcare market today is approximately 8.5 trillion. Just about 3 trillion of that sits here in the United States alone, but more importantly, it's expected to top 12 trillion by 2022. So not surprisingly, there's a considerable interest from the financial community, both strategic corporations and private equity firms that have been investing to date. A significant investment has been made in healthcare institutions, and an increasing amount is being focused on the development and application of technologies for healthcare. You know, there are 4 really key drivers here. And this is pre-COVID. But obviously health management, access to the market, an aging core patient base, and what we're gathered here today to talk about, which is innovation. It's estimated that here in the U.S. alone, almost 1/3 of healthcare investment is wasted. Miss and over-treatment, fraud, overspending, bloated administrative structures. So if we're going to find some balance and equality in the world as a whole, we're going to have to address that, and certainly technology can play a very significant role, because, you know, at its core, healthcare really is about gathering and deciphering and sharing information. It's about the information flow between patients and doctors, doctors and pharmacists, and so on. So this stream of facts and figures and experiences ultimately impacts the care of the patient and impacts those organizations that are providing that care. So, you know, the development of innovation specific to needs and wants of providers and patients is occurring across the world, and there are global applications. And this is before we enter into the dialogue that's so important today, which is, you know, how are we going to emerge? How are we going to reestablish this world that was largely without borders, as Jeffrey clearly points out, in a post-COVID environment? Well, of course, we're going to have to focus more on the assembly and the management and responsible use of data. You know, I referenced Q-Medic earlier, but the creation of businesses that will benefit all of us, it is one of the, you know, common denominators that all individuals share. We all need healthcare. So developing businesses that are considerate of the world of users, but that will provide incentive for investors, is paramount. So that comes back to that public-private need. So if without the incentive, without the profit opportunity, we're going to have to continue to appeal to the social will of individuals, and we know that is simply too altruistic. You know, looking at this today through the Transhuman Code lens, I think is even more important than it was, Carlos, when the book was published last spring. The core thesis of the Transhuman Code is that we have to keep the human at the center of gravity in that relationship between man, woman, and machine. We have to self-govern our actions. So, you know, I've said many times before that in the absence of a global governor of technology, and certainly with growing resistance to further regulation across all industry sectors, that the technology developers, the enablers, financiers like our organization, and the technology users, all of us, we have to decide what's right and what's wrong. You know, the management of our personal information has been and will continue to be an important part of our dialogue, and it is here today, and I think I know it will continue well beyond. And the protection of our digital rights has to be a key focus for all of us. But you know, equally importantly today, over 3 billion people on the planet, a population that's approaching 8 billion, have never seen a doctor before. They've never seen a healthcare professional before. They don't have access to them, and or they can't afford them. And so you know, the challenge that I would leave, the Transhuman Code challenge that I would leave everybody with here today, the panelist members as well as our audience, is, you know, how can we use technology to equalize accessibility to healthcare for those who are without it? And how can we help close that gap between the serviced and those without hope? You know, we've all been witness to the significant advancements in finance, and we've been witness to the growth of, in some African countries, from in just under a decade, from 2% of the population being banked to over 92% of the population being banked. Well, there was tremendous financial incentive for those financial companies to do that. So we have to create a model, I believe, if we're going to be socially responsible. We have to create a model, to your question, Carlos, that satisfies the financial needs of the investors, and that can help in order that we be able to deliver on the healthcare needs